Thank you all for coming. I appreciate the warm welcome. As Abby already said, my name is Charles Villard. I am currently a front-end engineer at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, where I build out a lot of front-end platform stuff. I can be found blogging occasionally on charlesvillard.co, posting way too much probably on Blue Sky, and I do have socials on other places that we're not going to really talk about, but you can find me there at CD Villard if you want. I started my career in web development in 2016, where I was a full stack dev, and I introduced Vue.js to some .NET web frameworks, some .NET web form applications. And that's where I got to learn about reactivity. I got to learn about front-end frameworks, and where I grew to love Vue. Fast forward to 2019, I got to attend VueConf. When it first came here to Tampa, when it was held at the Straz Center. And I was even lucky enough to meet some of the core team, some of the great people in the community, and to give a lightning talk called Ramp Up to Vue. There is a little embarrassing aside about that talk. Originally, I had wanted to talk about new features coming to Vue 3.0, things like the composition API and the RFC process behind all of that. Unfortunately, I got cold feet, chickened out, and I gave a different talk altogether, the ultimate speaker faux pas. You can go ahead and guilt me with like an ooh. There we go. I deserve that. But effectively, I talked about how I learned Vue and how others could get involved in the community. So today, I'm actually hoping to revisit that original topic with a little bit of an updated twist now that I've gotten to play with Vue again in more recent months in my own downtime. And so today I'm presenting to you full circle, a time traveler's perspective on Vue. Like I said, this is my thoughts having come back to Vue, having worked with other tools for a few years, and look at where the ecosystem was then, where it is now, where it might be going in the future. And Evan's talked a little bit about that, but we'll save that for the end. And so I know you're kind of thinking, why? I came here for a tech conference. Why do I want a history lesson? What are you doing? Well, I actually have a few arguments about that. Last year, Vue celebrated 10 years, so we can give a round of applause for that, right? That makes Vue a very mature framework for one that drives an entire developer ecosystem. I mean, we're all here because of that. And as someone who's coming back into Vue, the developer experience has made it extremely comfortable. Vue 2 was sort of where I had more experience with Vue, and it's still today a stable release and powers a lot of applications online. Abby may have joked about it a little bit, and I think the core team and the community have acknowledged it. Vue 3 got a big rewrite back in 2020, shifting away from JavaScript to a full TypeScript build, and that offered a lot of creature comforts, like first-class TypeScript support, obviously, out of the box. The adoption of Vite as the default compiler and build tool also offered improved SSR support, better HMR module replacement, and also faster build times, smaller bundle size. We can go down the list. You could definitely read more about it here on the Viewpoint blog. But those benefits also extended to all of the ancillary libraries that you might consume when you're building a Vue application as well. So some of those libraries we're going to talk about today. There was a slight side effect of that whole shift. The shift to TypeScript and for all of these libraries also meant it kind of created a little bit of a gap between a lot of what Vue 2 was built on and had built up and what Vue 3 was going to become. And like I said before, core team and the community has acknowledged that somewhat loudly. And we can see it in some data. Montreal's State of Vue survey from earlier, I believe it was released earlier this year. I might be wrong about that. Took a look at 1,400 respondents and what they had been working on, and for the previous 12 months prior to the report's release, 35% of those 1,400 respondents were working with Vue 2.7, and almost 20% of those same 1,400 respondents had worked with 2.6 or older in their day-to-day work. And so that kind of makes sense that we see a lot of Vue 2 code in the ecosystem. So let's take a quick look at a timeline. In 2016, Vue 2.0 was released. That's where we started seeing a lot of the developer experience that we know and love today. Vue 2.6, which was the penultimate version of V2, came out in February of 2019. And Vue 3.0 came out in September of 2020, not a year and a half, maybe a little bit more than a year and a half later. Even if you're assuming, a team didn't start with a package from Vue 1.0, right? That was released in 2015. That's still 4 years worth of development, engineering decisions, tech debt, compromises that would need to be migrated to Vue 3 if they wanted to stay on top of the latest and greatest, right? And really, all of this kind of goes to show an example of a software development sort of idiom that I think goes a little underappreciated. Any engineering choices that we make today will have long shelf lives, right? Time really does fly by when you're talking about engineering sprints and program increments. And so the choices that we're making, that were made then and even today, will see ramifications and impacts on teams going into the future, especially when you bring up scary words like refactoring, migration. And there are a number of factors that can slow down refactors and migrations. Code base scopes and sizes, depending on the number of repos that you may have to mess with in a given time, that can slow you down. Time and budget restrictions on teams. Some Vue dependencies are still locked in Vue 2 for myriad reasons. Maybe they just didn't care to update them, or support was dropped. And then even SLAs can play a factor in it with all the red tape that they can sometimes implement for a given team. And so it does help to remember and understand where the ecosystem was then and where it is now. When I was originally researching for this topic, the talk was mainly for people like me, right? Most of the people here probably have a great deal of experience with Vue, but I wanted to kind of talk to those who may just be coming back into the ecosystem. But as I was researching, I realized that this talk could help a few other people out. And so I wanted to kind of get a vibe. Who knew that this existed? I did not know about this special until, yes, I tried to go with Back to the Future as a theme. Figured it was done before. Tesla did a talk using it in 2019. I didn't want to copy her, but I never knew that it was a thing. So did anyone know that existed? No. No? Okay. So on to actually getting to know you guys. How many people here got their start with Vue 3.0? Okay, a few of us. All right, so hopefully this talk might help you learn maybe some of what you missed from Vue 2. Who here still works on Vue 2 today? Maybe you're working through a migration. All right, quite a few of you, all right. Maybe you already know some of this, but I think it'll help to kind of as an overview of what you might be transitioning to. And who might have never used Vue before, or maybe you're a decision maker exploring Vue as an option for your projects. Okay, that's fine. Everyone here seems to have used Vue, but at the very least, maybe you can take this back to those decision makers. Maybe you're making the argument for Vue at your work. Maybe this could be something you can show them, and that'll help them out in their decision making. So this is really just going to be a very high level 10,000-foot view of all the tools, pun intended, and could be helpful just in avoiding confusion between tools that you might Google and find that are used in Vue 2 versus Vue 3. All right. So I can promise for sure you will not leave this talk an expert on anything. I guarantee it. But at the very least, if you were lacking in leads, you might come away with something today. As we go through this talk, I'm going to kind of tackle it from the perspective of starting up a new Vue application, right? And we're going to kind of go back and forth with Vue 2 tools to represent then, and Vue 3 tools that we might see today. I'm going to cover all of these topics, however, so lightly, and try and keep it to time. So bear with me. We're going to kind of speed through probably more slides than I should have made. Okay, so going into it, starting a brand new Vue project, we're going from an empty page in an IDE. Both Vue 2 and Vue 3 offer script tags that you can use to incrementally adopt Vue. Vue 2 docs show these two at the top for development and production specifically. Vue 3 offers a global build which ties Vue to the global scope of the DOM that it renders in. And while these are, these can be used with things like inline template and X template, and you shouldn't be using that in production necessarily, though I have, as Evan said, some people build weird stuff with Vue. Don't ask me why I did that, but I had to. Vue 3, though, also offers a library called Petite Vue. And this is actually based off of the Vue reactivity system that Evan mentioned in the previous talk. It's a subset of the Vue 3 features that you might see. It's built for progressive enhancement. Is actually meant to kind of take a hand in what Alpine offers as a library. And I believe in the docs they also say that this could be a replacement for tools like jQuery as well. So this can be useful for starting if you want to progressively enhance. But for the rest of this talk, and for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to focus on using CLIs to start up a full-fat Vue application. And so back in the day, we would have reached for the Vue CLI. And what does it do? It's the CLI for Vue. It says it on the tin. And basically, it was a full system for Vue development. It offered it was basically based on Webpack at the time, and it had interactive scaffolding for Vue projects with features including Babel, some TypeScript support, progressive web application support, CSS preprocessors, and testing out of the box. It also came with a graphic user interface that you could utilize to start up the application in the same way. And then also can be used for Vue 3, but it remains kind of locked down to 3.2 at the time of writing. Maintenance was discontinued for this in light of newer tooling in Create Vue. This is basically Vue CLI's little brother, and is a Vite-powered scaffolding tool. And it is capable of scaffolding both Vue 3 and Vue 2 applications with the use of Vue at latest and Vue at legacy respectively when you run npm create. And it has many of the same options as the Vue CLI did, but the difference here is that it's just for scaffolding. What the Vue CLI offered was also a plugin system that would allow for you to change the configuration of Webpack under the hood, and it also offered access to the Vue CLI binary should you need to make any changes to lower level environments. So we started up our application, right? Now we can get into the nitty-gritty of building out these components. We have a scaffold, it's empty, let's start filling it up. For the sake of time, not going to touch on the myriad libraries that exist to help out with that, because we can talk about Vuetify and other styling libraries, all kinds of things for 3D and so on. We're just going to focus on Vue, but it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge what a lot of the TypeScript and JavaScript community are doing for Vue. There are a lot of Vue equivalents that exist right now. Evan called this out back in March with the advent of, I think Framer Motion became Motion and released Motion for Vue. There have been a lot of ports of popular UI libraries in mainly Reka and Shadcn are mentioned in this post. Tress.js handles what React 3 Fiber did for React, and so on. And so you can check out the link on the page if you don't care to go to that one site that people like to talk about in certain tones. And you can go ahead and take a look at the whole conversation. There's actually a lot more listed there. So. Going back in time, or as far back to the quote-unquote latest version of Vue 2, we have Vue 2.6, and at this point we're talking about very established developer experiences. Core feature beyond the adoptability that we sort of touched on before with the use of script tags and script includes was the declarative rendering with the use of the options API. And that would allow you to, and as most of you I'm sure already know, pass in an object to a new Vue instance that would enable you to tie it to an element and also pass in a data property to that. That would enable two-way data binding through the use of vModel. Reactivity system was driven by object.define property. Which would take those properties and transform them into getters and setters behind the scenes. So you didn't have to worry about that, though you could set that access up yourself. And then also introduced single file components, allowing for single node component-based architecture, meaning that you would have to have a single HTML element as the parent element in template, and that would render regardless of what application you ran. It also introduced V-directives like vbind, von, vif, velse to allow for dynamic data binding as well. There were some additional quality of comfort features, TypeScript support, sort of. It did take some work with the use of Vue extend, with sometimes external tooling, and with the use of class style components as well. And there were also transitionary features in preparation for Vue 3, namely new slot syntax that made it simpler to slip content into the child of a pre-existing component. Fast forward to today, and now we're back to that major TypeScript rewrite in Vue 3. I believe the latest is Vue 3.5. Does anyone know if 3.6 got released? Okay, good, so I'm not behind yet. And that's where we see the introduction of the composition API, which allows for much better code organization. Everyone here is familiar with having to scroll up and down the object, defining the Vue component and trying to understand where the three things are that relate to the other three things. This allows you to better organize the logic around the Vue component. We updated the reactivity system to a proxy-based system using JavaScript proxies. That allowed for better change detection and performance, as well as improvement to custom element support, meaning we can better use HTML5 web components. Other new features included teleport for shifting content outside of its parent fragment. For now we have access to multiple root nodes, so we don't have to have unnecessary wrappers around around the content that we want to render, and suspense for fallback content as well. There was actually, though, I don't know if you caught it earlier, I said that to Vue 2.6, I believe, or yeah, I said the penultimate version of Vue 2, which was Vue 2.6. There was one more version of Vue 2, that was Vue 2.7. This backported a lot of features from Vue 3 to Vue 2 for people who may be still working with Vue 2 dependencies but want newer developer experience. This included updates to the composition API based on object-defined property again. So using Vue 2's reactivity system as opposed to Vue 3's allowed for that same developer experience to be leveraged by Vue 2 developers. It also included script setup, which is now part and parcel with the composition API for single file components. And vbind was also introduced for Vue 2.7 for use in CSS, so we can have the logic that we're defining in our Vue component, we can allow that to control our styles as well. And so, unfortunately, Vue 2 reached end of life in 2023. Now, that's really only been about close to a year and a half now. For anyone who might still want to use Vue 2, there are some organizations that have been leveraging Vue since the beginning. I remember in 2019, I learned that NASA was using Vue to run a lot of their projects, and so they may have had to make some changes themselves. There are organizations that are supporting Vue 2 with security updates, like Hero Devs, who actually hires a lot of the core team to work on these updates. They have actually a really great blog for anyone having trouble with migration to Vue 3, and might be worth checking out. And for anyone still wondering, don't worry, our spaceships are safe. They did update their tools to Vue 3, so they're good. All right. So we have components now built out, and now it would help if we can actually debug some of them to understand what the code is doing when we render it on the browser. How do we handle that? Well, we have extensions for VS Code. There are extensions for other environments. WebStorm offers great Vue support out of the box. And there's a bunch for Vim and NeoVim. Does anybody use NeoVim here? Vim? All right, we've got the corner over there. Arch Linux? There's a one guy. I got him. I found the guy. All right. So back then we would have reached for Viter, which was Vue tooling for VS Code. Basically allowed for initially just syntax highlighting, but also offered Emmet support, linting and error checking, formatting IntelliSense, and component data auto-completion, info on hover, so you can sort of peek at where component data was coming from. That unfortunately did reach an end of life, also at the end of 2023 with the same end of life as V2. What we reach for nowadays is Vue language tools, which is an updated set of tooling for Vue developers for primarily Vue 3. It offers many of the same features as Viter did, and also adds type checking for single file components, diagnostics, as well as navigation features, so you can have better go-to searching and references. And there is a component metadata extraction. There is actually a very interesting story behind this. Some of you may be familiar with Villard, which was what this was previously called. Villard in itself was developed by Vue core team member. I believe he's a Vue core team member, and I believe I'm not mispronouncing this, Johnson Chu. And it basically offered it was originally a personal project of Johnson's to create a VS Code extension. This was about the same time that Viter was the official extension. And it happened to offer improved architecture and improved performance over Viter. So over time, Villard did become the official Vue dev tools, I believe, as of V1. Now, again, over time, it also started to sort of come away from Vue and become Vue agnostic. Offered embedded language processing, TypeScript support with its own TypeScript language server, interaction code for interacting with other language services. And so eventually Villard spun out its older packages into what we now know as Vue language tools. And Villard.js itself is its own embedded language framework, and is used by other popular tools like Astro, which we will touch on a little bit later. So if you ever see, if you've ever installed the Astro extension and you see that .astro file name and you get all of those nice creature comforts, that's Villard under the hood. And now that we have some tooling in our IDE, what about understanding what's going on in our browser? Vue DevTools has basically been the tool to reach for that since Vue 2. It offers time travel debugging, it offers inspection and prop editing for props, and it offers a peek into state, stores, and routes along the way. There really hasn't been too many major shifts between the two, other than being able to understand Vue 3 and Vue 2. And so here we're going to start seeing a little bit of the schism that I mentioned before, right? Tools that are Vue 2 specific versus Vue 3 specific. And so Vue Dev Tools version 6 would be reached for Vue 2, and then the V7 version would be used for Vue 3. You wouldn't be able to, there is a little bit of a conflict if you install both, so something to keep in mind if you're working across that gap, so to speak. And so now that we have some components, we need to kind of start building out more than just our index.html, right? So now we need to start talking about routing. What do we reach for routing? Well, back then, it was Vue Router. That's the official package for routing in Vue. It offered component-based route configuration with dynamic route matching, nested navigation, programmatic navigation, and also had an HTML5 mode as well as a hash mode, so you can opt into improved SEO, and also offered Vue transitions as well as custom scroll behavior. What would we reach for today now that we're working with Vue 3? Vue Router. Again, and now that Vue 3 has seen sort of a glow up with TypeScript, we got a lot of updates and now can also handle typed routes as well as a new history mode in memory history mode, making it useful for any non-browser environment as well, useful for SSR or server-based environments. Now, really, I guess for routing, that's about it. Actually, not quite. Last year, Evan Sutherland introduced a new routing package that he and his friends have been working on called Kitbag Router. And the big advantage that they're promising with this is the use of type safety for routes instead of relying on magic strings to define your route. You would be able to use resolver functions in order to return the route appropriately. It also offered typed query parameters out of the box with built-in type primitives and the ability to create custom types and built-in rejection handling. So if you have to handle not authorized situations or not authenticated situations, it offers tools for that as well, so you don't have to write that custom boilerplate every time. So we've got some pages, but we want to start passing around some information to components and to other pages. So how do we start handling that? Back then, we would reach for Vuex. This was a Redux-based, this was a pattern based on Redux, by its own official library for Vue, and basically offered a central store of state. Multiple components were able to access everything through getters and mutations and actions, and it also split into modules that would all get their own state and getters and mutations and actions, and that would split into modules that would get its own state, mutations, and actions, and that would split into and it's turtles all the way down. But it would allow for expansive state across Vue 2. Today we would reach for Pina. Pina's become the official recommendation for state for Vue 3 applications as of 2022, and basically evolved from an experiment by someone that may be very familiar to the Vue community, Eduardo Morarte, also known as Pospa, and he basically started experimenting with Vuex using the composition API from Vue 3. And that eventually turned into a fully realized state management library. The Vuex docs actually refer to Pina as Vue 5 under another name, given the similarities between the Vuex 5 API proposals and what Pina was offering. And you can actually take a look at that proposal still today if you're curious. That's still up on the Vue.js repository. The big differences between Vuex 4 and Pina is that beyond TypeScript is that Pina offers less cognitive complexity by dropping mutations as a concept, whereas with Vuex 4 you have to utilize actions to sort of trigger mutations. This means less boilerplate as well with a simpler API, and flatter folder structure across the board with like file names as the namespacing, meaning all of it just kind of sits at the top level of a stores folder. Those stores can be imported into each other, so if you really want those circular dependencies, you're more than welcome to go that route. And it also offered built-in testing utilities and hot module replacement for stores specifically without page reloading. So that's our client-side state handled, right? But we are living in a time where we have SSR and asynchronous data calls and live updating of data on the same page. So how are we going to handle all of that? How do we handle our state management on the server side when it doesn't match the client? How do we handle things like query invalidation and caching and data loading and optimistic updates and stale data management? From my experience, and I'm saying this from my experience, I don't recall there being a great story for this back in the day. I don't recall this being a major concern back in the day because when 2019 was, when I was using Vue in 2019, we were very much worried about SSG, right? Jamstack, that was the popular term. SSR was a thing, but not so much not as popular in the JavaScript space. But today we have a couple of options that can handle this for us. One of them being TanStack Query. If you're familiar with Tanner Lindsley, this is part of a huge suite of tools that he produces. TanStack Query is a framework agnostic state management library for JavaScript and TypeScript, but it also supports Vue. It used to be called Vue Query back in the day, and then when it rolled into the TanStack family of tools, it became TanStack Query. It does come with dev tools out of the box. It doesn't tie into any global state management library, so technically you could use any global state management library with it. Calling back to Piña again, Postva, the creator of Piña, started working on a new library called Piña Colada. And that makes me thirsty right now. I'm talking a lot. And basically, it's billed as the data fetching layer for Piña because it directly integrates with Piña itself. You set up Piña, then you import Piña, not import, but you bring Piña into an instance of Piña Colada. It reduces a lot of the boilerplate and it allows for monitoring, it reduces the need to monitor manual data properties if you ever have to define is loading, is error, stuff like that on your own. It does that for you out of the box. It is not production ready yet, but definitely worth keeping an eye on. It'll likely become the next official async state management library of Vue. And there are some really great videos you can find on YouTube. Elise Patrikainen, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, spoke on it last year at Vue Germany, and Eduardo Morote actually gave a talk at Vue Nation this year. We're handling a lot by hand. We're kind of building out our own little custom bit of kit for Vue, so why not reach for something that can handle a lot of this for us? If there were only a framework that would handle all of this meta work for us. That's it, kind of. At least in terms of a full stack application, I'd be remiss to not give Nuxt its own section. Back then we would have reached for Nuxt 2, which was the official opinionated framework built by some of the same people on the Vue core team, as well as, I'm not going to, Puja? I'm so bad with names, and I'm sorry about that. But basically, it's sort of established a full stack, the full stack approach to Vue development. Offered file-based routing, inbuilt data fetching, render modes with static and server-side renders. Component auto import, meaning that you can tie your component folder to the rest of your Nuxt application and you wouldn't have to write another import statement, hopefully. But effectively, all of your components could be called in other components in your Nuxt application, and it will know where to look and get all of those. It also offered a module system for third-party integrations. Much like Vue 2, Nuxt 2 did reach end-of-life support as of June 30th of 2024. Hero Devs does offer never-ending support for Nuxt, working with the core team again, and the Nuxt team also offers enterprise support for anyone looking to move from Nuxt 2 to the latest version of Nuxt 3. Nuxt 3 is kind of more of a good thing. It was a rewrite of Nuxt, introduces Vite as the default compiler, Vue 3 as the default library, and introduces a new server engine in the form of Nitro. This allows for cross-platform support for Node, but also for Dino, for browsers, as well as for serverless. Nitro introduces 2 new rendering modes to Nuxt, with hybrid rendering for route-based rendering and caching strategies, meaning you can have any number of pages pre-rendered, and then also define rules for those pages that are handling data, things like stale while revalidate come to mind. The auto imports feature also gets extended. It's no longer just for components. It's also useful for utilities and Vue 3 composables, which, if you're not familiar with Vue 3, little bits of functionality that you can bring in and use around your application. It also introduced Nuxt dev tools that was actually offered in 3.1, if I remember correctly, and then turned on by default in 3.8. And that has a ton of features that I'm not going to try and get into, but 2 that I do want to call out that I kind of wish I had when I was writing in Nuxt is the component graph view, meaning you can see all the relationships between your components on the front end, and an imports tab that shows everything imported into the application, as well as access to documentation from the browser, should you need it. We're going to have some great talks over the course of this conference today from Daniel, Dino, and Alexander on Nuxt, so I definitely encourage you to check those out when you get the chance. And there have been other frameworks that we could reach for. These kind of land more in the SSG Jamstack version. Who was around for Jamstack, by the way? How old of an audience am I talking to? How long have people been developers here? All right, quite a few. Thank goodness. I'm not alone. Back then, we had a couple of options, probably more than just this, but the 2 that I saw more in conversation than others were VuePress and GridSum. VuePress was actually the documentation engine for Vue. It never really meant to be a static site generator, but it turned out to really work for blogs and for other content-driven sites. It was a themable static site generator based on Vue 2 and Webpack, and it offered file-based routing using markdown files and the folder structure to sort of determine page routes. That same functionality was leveraged for internationalization and localization quite effectively. Another framework was GridSum, static site generator with GraphQL. Who remembers Gatsby? This was the attempt to create Gatsby for Vue, effectively. Similar to Gatsby, its big to-do feature was the use of GraphQL to unify multiple data sources from CMS, local files, and APIs, and allow you to render that onto pages that it would statically generate, and allowed you to serve the whole bundle from there. Today, VuePress actually has a younger brother in VitePress. VitePress being a Vite and Vue 3 version, basically more of the same functionality. The only real differences between VuePress and VitePress were that VitePress got some updates to its theme and customization functionality, but beyond that, the 2 may as well be more or less structurally the same, from my understanding. Don't quote me on that. But cool thing about VuePress is it is still being updated and can handle rendering of Vue 3, should you choose to use that. GridSum is no longer a tier, but we do have other options like Astro. As I mentioned before, Astro is a framework. The interesting sell about Astro, if you haven't heard about it, who hasn't heard of Astro? I actually went to a talk, and some people actually didn't know about Astro. Okay, a few people. So Astro takes a different approach to being a front-end framework in general. Instead of focusing on building out pages and shoving all of the JavaScript into the browser, it builds HTML. and forces you to opt into that JavaScript functionality explicitly. You have to decide whether you're going to render a bit of JavaScript functionality on load or on visible or using any number of client attributes on your JavaScript or on your components. And Vue works great with it. I've heard that it is an extremely popular option. I have yet to experience that myself, but I've spoken with a number of Vue developers and they love it. And finally, excuse me, okay, I'm going to try and get through these next few slides because I think I'm well past time. Testing. I'm not going to be able to speak to testing too deeply. Sorry, that doesn't make me a bad developer, I hope, but Vue test utils was leveraged pretty heavily back then and is still leveraged very heavily now. Is basically a set of utility functions that you can use to test your Vue components and applications. Back then, Jest was pretty tightly coupled with Vue test utils. You did have options though. You could use Karma, you could use Karma, which was a browser-based test runner. You could use Mocha and Chai for test writing and assertions respectively, and Synon for your test spies and stubs. Today we're kind of spoiled for choice with testing. Evan is actually, I believe it was Evan, but we now have vtest. Basically anything Vite related I kind of attribute to Evan. Is that wrong? Okay, no one's going to answer that. That's fine. But vtest is a Jest-compatible, Vite-driven component testing library and has seen adoption quite a bit these days. Playwright offers cross-browser and cross-platform end-to-end testing, meaning you can test multiple popular browsers, Android and iOS as well as Node, I believe. And Cypress is a giant suite, multi-solution testing framework that offers end-to-end testing, component testing, accessibility testing, and more. Definitely don't take my word as if this were the end of testing, not to put any pressure on him, but I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Henry Lier, is going to be talking about accessible front-end testing for beginners later in the conference. Definitely worth taking a look at his talk. So, we've gone through a lot of development really quickly. So where can we really learn about all of this? Definitely not for me. Like I said, you're not leaving here experts on anything. If you learn something, wow. Thank you. But Vue.js.org is where you can find all the documentation, and they actually have great guides on Vue 3 migration, referencing tooling specifically. They have a number of recommendations that I didn't get to bring up here in this talk. And there's also quite a lot of online courses. Vue School, which is a sponsor at today's conference. Let's give it up for them really quick. Plug, plug, plug. But Vue School offers a number of courses by the core team, as well as VueMastery.com, where a number of these talks from past Vue Comps have been hosted, and likely these will be hosted as well. Front-End Masters is also a great course site for JavaScript and front-end development, and now back-end development as well. That's where I got my start when former core team member Sarah Drasner introduced Intro to Vue as one of their courses. Ben Hong, who is here at the conference, as well as Evan, you also have courses on Front-End Masters. And then Laracas offers a number of Vue resources, as Vue.js is their official front-end framework not for them specifically, but for Laravel. So I'm well over time, and I'm cutting into your break, and I'm so sorry. But I want to kind of address really quick, like, Vue's future. What are we looking at moving forward now that we've kind of gone through this back and forth then and now experience, which I hope was okay, and I'm sorry if it wasn't. Well, I hope you were here maybe an hour ago. Evan addressed a lot of what Vapor Mode is doing under the hood now, or will be doing under the hood once it's released. The talk, I think, actually highlighted something that the core team wanted to address post Vue 3 update. A lot of the new changes that we're going to see to Vue are going to be under the hood, and in going back to the Montreal State of Vue survey, Evan also addressed in the wrap-up of that survey that even if there is like breaking changes and a big major update to like Vue 4, they're going to try and keep the changes minimal, the same APIs, just everything under the hood, and making things opt-in. Something else that we need to address regarding Vue's future is AI. This was from same Eduardo Morote, creator of Piña and Piña Colada, and many other Vue libraries. And I think anyone in this room who's tried to use AI to generate Vue code can attest to this. Who's used AI agents or ChatGPT or any kind of chatbot to generate some version of Vue code? Yeah, I wanted to give it a second because I knew more hands were going to go up. But yeah, basically between the prevalence of React, which is also addressed and cited from multiple sources in the State of Vue survey, as well as looking at GitHub's 2024 Octaverse report, where JavaScript and TypeScript are still huge languages, right? Second and third respectively. JavaScript used to be first, but Python kind of supplanted that, not just because of AI, but also because TypeScript is being adopted more. It's really no wonder that we're seeing, difficulties as Vue developers generating code that we can rely on. I've seen some people have a sentiment that it's basically a dice roll. It's 50-50, whether you get Vue code that you can use or something else completely, likely based on React.
That's not exclusive to Vue. That's any coder, right?
That's very fair. And even today, if you follow anyone in the YouTube content creation space, if you follow a gentleman by the name of Theo Brown, he released, I believe yesterday, a video calling React the last framework, basically framing it as AI has ingested so much React code that's effectively what it can put out reliably, and that may be what we see moving forward, which I don't believe, but we do see that there is some effort by people in the community to make that change. I would also like to call out that there may be more strategies that we have yet to see. A few people talking about it today. Daniel, Lori, Justin, and other Daniel are going to be talking about AI in today and tomorrow, so definitely check that out. So thank you. I'm well over time. I'm glad Pratik and Vincent didn't come here and choke me out. But thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned something. Enjoy the break.